think it might be time you called me number one.
Picard Season 3 keeps on rocking, and this episode is all about sabotage.
Sabotage.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and secret canon connections in Star Trek Picard Season 3, Episode 3, 17 Seconds. Right away we get that blaster beam sound effect from Vadic's ship, which should remind you of last week, but also of Star Trek the Motion Picture, Jango Fett, and all the stuff that we talked about in our last video. In real life, this blaster beam is a specific musical instrument. It's an 18-foot-long metal beam beset with tense wires and attached to electrical guitar pickups. This unique instrument was designed by John Lasell, although it was popularized by Craig Huxley. That's followed by the classic alert condition red icon, a style of red alert first introduced in The Wrath of Khan, a film which has been heavily homaged and referenced throughout Picard Season 3.
Because he's my son.
Is that David?
You have 1 hour to hand over Jack Crusher.
I give you 60 seconds, Admiral.
Keeping with the Wrath of Khan vibe, as the Titan is under attack, we see a quick schematic of the ship, which outlines the damage that the Shrike has inflicted thus far. The aft shield generator has no charge, and the impulse drive is offline. The distribution of damage to the Titan feels reminiscent of the damage to the Enterprise in Wrath, when Spock says,
"They knew exactly where to hit us."
This episode's dive into the nebula also references the Wrath because the shields and sensors stop functioning.
There go the sensors.
Before the Wrath of Khan, Star Trek canon had not established anything about fighting inside nebulas. Nebula. Are you sure?
Yeah, man.
Oh, all right. Wait. Hold on. In the Marvel movies, when there's 2 nebulas in Endgame, should we say that that's a nebulae or 2 nebulas?
I just met the video person.
Anyways, as established in The Wrath, fighting in a nebula means that your sensors don't work and your shields don't work either. As a former captain of the Titan once said,
"Trouble with the nebula, sir, is all that static discharge and gas clouds our tactical display. Visual won't function, and shields will be useless."
As things get tense on the Titan, we flash back to before and we see a future version of the LA skyline. Now we know it's LA because Will and Jean-Luc are in the Los Angeles version of 10 Forward established in Picard Season 2. Before is probably the year 2381, and that's because Riker and Picard are celebrating the recent birth of Thaddeus Riker Troy as they toast to Thaddeus.
To your newborn son.
To Thaddeus.
How do you know this flashback's from 2381?
Well, we don't know exactly, but back in our 2020, Picard co-creator Michael Chabon mentioned on Instagram that Thad died when he was 15 in the year 2396, which would put his birthday somewhere around 2381. Riker is also in command of the Luna-class Titan at this point, which would put his flashback a full year after Riker and Troy rescued the Cerritos in the Lower Decks Season 1 finale. Both Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes are de-aged here to look about how they looked in the year 2002 in our timeline. Riker took command of this Titan in 2379, right after Nemesis, so this meeting and the birth of Thad are probably all just a few years after that movie. And by the way, in case you forgot, the character of Thaddeus Riker Troy died from a sci-fi illness, mendaxic neurosclerosis, which could have been cured by android tech had the Federation not banned all since after 2385. He's never been depicted on screen, other than as a baby in a photo in the Picard Season 1 episode Nepenthe. Later in this episode, when Riker tells Jack,
And I had a son.
he's referencing the untimely death of Thad. Thaddeus was named after a Riker family ancestor from the Civil War named Thaddeus Riker, who was referenced in the Voyager episode Death Wish, which featured the appearance of Jonathan Frakes as Will Riker, as well as John Delancey as Q.
Captain Janeway, the USS Voyager.
Now, although never confirmed on screen, Michael Chabon suggested that Thad's middle name was Worf, which author James Swallow used in the Picard prequel-era novel The Dark Veil. While getting loaded with Riker, Picard is rocking a leather jacket that is kind of like the one he had in Insurrection, and points out that nobody will love a Riker baby more than your mom, Deanna Troi.
His mother.
And soon your mom Troy calls up and she's pissed and mentions that the baby Thad has vomited all over the warp core, which really makes you wonder why she had a baby in engineering, the most dangerous place on any Star Trek ship. Anyways, Riker apologizes, saying,
I'm sorry, Imzadi.
Now this word, Imzadi, is the Betazoid word for beloved. We first heard this word when Troy said it telepathically to Riker in Encounter at Farpoint.
Do you remember what I taught you, Imzadi?
Back on the Titan, Seven is still confined to quarters, but she's got a cool model of Voyager to keep her company. In sickbay, Beverly and Jean-Luc are really getting into specifics about when she got pregnant and when Jack was born, and Bev can't stop name-dropping deep-cut Star Trek planets. She says,
"Do you remember our shore leave on Casparia Prime?"
Now, the planet Casparia Prime is apparently very fancy because that's where Jadzia Dax wanted to originally have her honeymoon with Worf in Deep Space Nine.
No one can oppose the beating of two Klingon hearts.
Next, Crusher talks about an unseen mission in which Picard was kidnapped by
refugees from Kalara 5. Angry about Romulan relocation, kidnapped you and held you for 9 days.
This references the Kalaran system from Star Trek Nemesis, which is where the crew found the body of B4. It's also the spot where Picard drove his Starfleet dune buggy, the Argo, which oddly created a brief back-to-back Star Trek movie tradition in which Enterprise captains drive cars around really fast. Coleraine 5 also sounds a little bit like Carla 5, who was a character from the final episode of the animated series, The Counterclock Incident, who lived in a universe in which time flowed backward and everybody turned into babies, sort of like de-aging, but like for real.
They're all children.
Of course, Picard has been de-aged before, and he didn't even need to go to a backward universe to do it. In the TNG episode Rascals, Picard, Keiko, Guinan, and Ro were all turned into little kids thanks to a transporter accident.
I assure you I am Captain Picard.
Hey, remember when Ro was playing with crayons with Guinan at the end of Rascals, and we never actually saw her turn back into an adult?
Yeah, that was weird.
Do you think she stayed a kid for a few episodes, just like to mess with people?
Love that, high five. Anyways, Bev isn't done deep cutting because now she's talking about
2 Reman assassins intercepted the ship in the Denatra sector.
This is a double Easter egg calling out the Remans, an alien race who was enslaved by the Romulans for a long time and who have only appeared on screen in Nemesis. And the Denatra sector seems to be another Nemesis shoutout and is probably an area of Romulan space named for the Romulan commander Denatra, who ended up assisting Picard and the Enterprise.
You heard the lady. Let's go to work.
In Nemesis, Commander Denatra was played by Dina Meyer, famous to many science fiction fans for her role as Dizzy in Starship Troopers. Bev continues to mention complicated things that happened to Jean-Luc in the months just following Nemesis, including a long time when he had to
negotiate with the Praetor.
The Praetor is the leader of the Romulan Empire, who in Nemesis was the human clone of Jean-Luc, Shinzon, played by Bane himself, Tom Hardy. The concept of the Romulan Praetor was established way back in the original series episode Balance of Terror.
And it is our duty to crush the Praetor's enemies.
We have no idea who the Praetor was back in 2380, right after Nemesis, so maybe it was Denatra. Beverly later completes her marathon of Star Trek Planet Deep Cuts when she mentions,
"We were on a supply run to Sarnia Prime."
And this is actually a reference to Discovery, when the Mirror Universe version of Tilly, aka Captain Tilly, was known as the Slayer of Sorna Prime.
The only pleasure I take is from the blood of my enemies staining my uniform.
Picard and Beverly talk a bit about the terribleness of Jean-Luc's own father, Maurice Picard, who we first saw in the episode Tapestry, and more prominently in Picard Season 2, when he was played by James Callis, who was definitely not a Cylon.
There are significant problems with implementing my Cylon detection method.
Speaking of family issues, Beverly talks about how her parents were killed, which was established in TNG in the episodes The Arsenal of Freedom and Sub Rosa. Beverly was raised by her grandmother Felissa, who was also a lady who liked to get down with ghosts. Beverly also mentions losing a husband, which references the first Jack Crusher, who died under Picard's command. And finally, she says she also lost her son Wesley, which references the fact that Wesley moved on to another plane of existence to become a space-time traveler in the episode Journey's End. Wesley is not dead, of course. He continues to travel through time and space, and even recruited Kor Soong, a clone created by Adam Soong in the 21st century in the Season 2 finale of Picard. But apparently, he hasn't bothered to check on his mom or Jean-Luc in a while. Speaking of Jean-Luc and Beverly's long and tormented relationship, Riker tells Jack that I
spent 2 decades in a spaceship watching you get cooked up before you were born.
Now, Riker's exaggerating. Slightly. Picard, Crusher, and Riker all served together on the Enterprise D from 2364 to 2371 when Riker crashed the saucer section into Veridan 3 in Generations. Then, Picard, Riker, and Crusher all served on the Enterprise E until 2379 when Riker and Troy left for the Titan, during which time we know Crusher became pregnant with Jack. So, it's closer to 15 years since Riker observed the on-again, off-again relationship between Crusher and Picard, but whatever. Riker's still awesome. Picard and Beverly talk a bit longer about why Jack has an English accent, despite the fact that he didn't grow up around English people. Beverly reveals that he
went to school in London, never shook it.
This lampshades the idea that Jean-Luc himself speaks with an English accent, even though he's French. In Season 2, Picard revealed that his ancestor left France during World War II and immigrated to England, and that the family only returned to France many generations later. So, both Jean-Luc and Jack have strange reasons for having an English accent, even though neither of them is actually English. Back in the action, Riker and Picard are teaming up and shooting photon torpedoes and detonating those with phasers. Picard jokes,
I think it might be time you called me number 1.
And we hear the classic Star Trek fanfare composed by Alexander Courage way back in 1964. This sweet moment between Jean-Luc and Will interestingly leads to a scene which is a massive Easter egg for a scene between Jean-Luc and Will in First Contact. When Raffi sneaks up on Worf, our favorite Klingon is listening to opera composed by Berlioz, specifically from the opera La Toine. The specific selection toward the end of La Toine is number 38, Valance Sonore. Picard was listening to this exact same piece of music at the beginning of First Contact when Riker came into his ready room. In the movie, Riker incorrectly identified the music as being composed by Bizet, and Picard corrected him.
Bizet? Berlioz.
Clearly, Worf gained an interest in opera from Picard, and Worf just introducing himself has a ton of Easter eggs. He's the son of Moog, which is the name of his father established way back in TNG.
You are Worf, son of Moog.
He says that he's part of the House of Martok, and that's because he became part of General Martok's family in Deep Space Nine.
The House of Martok would be honored to welcome the son of Moog into our family.
But Worf also honors his adoptive human parents, mentioning that he is the son of Sergei, House Rozhenko. And then he keeps going, seemingly bragging, saying,
"Bane to the Duras family,"
which references the Klingon traitor Duras, who Worf straight up killed in the TNG episode Reunion. Worf ends his litany of badassery, mentioning that he is
Slayer of Gowron,
which references the DS9 episode Taking Into the Wind, in which Worf killed the Klingon Chancellor Gowron in a duel to the death. Worf offers Raffi some chamomile tea, which might seem like a weak drink for a hardcore killer like Worf, but never forget what he called prune juice way back in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise.
Warrior's drink.
Back on the Titan, Riker is channeling his Han Solo thing again, which he started last week when he said,
"Hey kid, it's only one of those plasma charges."
And continues this week when he says,
"Punch it!
Punch it! Punch it!"
Let's punch it.
Punch it real good.
You done yet?
Yeah, I'm good.
Ladies and gentlemen, salt and pepper!
Punch it real good. All right, done for real now, sorry.
So, while all this is going on, Jack and Seven have figured out that somebody intentionally made the Titan leak Verterium, a substance used to insulate the warp core, which was first mentioned in the Voyager episode Investigations.
They're made from a substance known as Verterium cortinide. Do you know where we can find a source?
Jack and Seven quickly realize that short-range phaser fire has caused the leak, which has to be the work of sabotage.
Is this why you sabotaged my ship?
Worf and Raffi end up tracking down a baddie named Titus Rika, who is played by actor Thomas Dekker. Hardcore fans will remember him as Jean-Luc Picard's son. In Generations, when Picard has a weird Nexus fantasy as Christmas, he has a son and daughter, and that fake son is Thomas Picard, played by Thomas Dekker, who reappears here as a shapeshifter.
How long have you been away from the Great Link?
That's right, the Changelings from Deep Space Nine are back. Also known as the Founders, the Changelings were the leaders of the Dominion and fought a war against the Federation in the latter seasons of Deep Space Nine. Odo, of course, was a changeling and joined the Great Link of Changelings at the end of the series in All That You Leave Behind. Worf references both the Great Link and Odo in this episode, telling Raffi that a man of honor contacted him from within the Link. Worf refers to Odo as a close friend, which is super touching for all us hardcore DS9 fans. The actor who played Odo, Rene Auberginois, passed away in 2019, but Odo will live forever as part of the Great Link.
This is the way I want you to remember me.
So now, with the reintroduction of changelings, can anybody be trusted, or is everyone a Cylon?
There are significant problems with implementing my Cylon detection method.
You're too late. We are everywhere.
Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.